I thought I was hardened to the west, until that morning, a rope stained with blood lying in the snow, a child's cry snapped by the wind, and Harlan Pike standing still as a fence post. When Crow pulled his gun and demanded blood for blood, I understood. Sometimes it isn't bullets, but a rope given new meaning that keeps a man from leaving. I saw it first. The frayed rope with blood clinging to it lay slanted across the hard snow, right where the wind had shifted. The red had dulled, but when I put my nose close to the ground, the faint metallic smell still clung. A man's boot prints cut across it, heels deep, toes dragging long like someone who had run hard, then stopped, turned back. Farther on were uneven grooves as if something heavy had been dragged, or a body with no strength left to walk. Harlan Pike got off his horse. He didn't touch the rope. His scarred fingers hovered above it, measuring the space, then drew back. The hem of his coat brushed the snow with a dry rasp. The horse exhaled smoke, tail flicking, ears tilted toward the pines. I stood just off his back, far enough not to break the wind, close enough to see how he never hurried. "Old blood," I whispered. Harlan shook his head, just barely, still warm when it met the wind. That was all he said, then silence. I bent lower, used the handle of my knife to scrape away a thin cover of snow on the rope. The fibers were rough, frayed at points where it had once been pulled tight. One end knotted, the other flattened, as if ground underfoot many times. I looked at the prints again, tried to read their direction. Not the rounded soles of horsemen. Wide, blunt. A man used to walking distance, or one who lived by heavy hands. "Don't touch," Harlan warned, eyes still fixed on the tree line. I slid the knife back into its sheath. The wind turned, brought with it damp smoke, not the crisp bite of burning pine, something wet rising slow, edged with animal hide. Harlan stepped over the rope, as if stepping across a question. He motioned with his hand. "Stay close, no more words." I followed. The boot prints led into an opening in the trees, where old pines stood like posts. The snow here was mixed with rot and leaf mold. Each step broke with a small, brittle crack. Above, the sky was stretched hide, flat gray, no sign of sun. Harlan walked ahead, weight on the outer edges of his heels, keeping the snow from sinking deep. The movement of a man long used to traveling in silence. "Whose is it?" I asked, meaning the rope, not needing an answer. Carved his left hand. He avoided touching things that might hold scent. Others called it fear. I called it survival. We went another dozen paces. Then the wind fell, like someone cupped hands over ears. And in that hush, another sound rose. A child's cry, short, cut in half by cold, then gone. Then again, weaker, muffled, as if through thick cloth. Harlan turned his head slow. His eyes went dark, not with fear, with calculation. He brought 2 fingers to his lips. Silence. I stopped breathing. The horse behind me hissed, faint, lifted its head. Harlan tugged the rein once, steady, no glance back. He listened, head tilted, like a man listening for water inside stone. "Left," I murmured. He nodded once, low, then moved, never running before he knew. I followed, palms sweating despite the cold, the knife dragging heavy at my hip. The cry broke again, this time joined by a second sound. the wet snuffle of a child who has just cried out. The wind shifted again. Smoke, thicker, and the faint, sour note of old milk. I asked nothing more. The rope still burned in my head like a red letter left unfinished. We came out of the stand of pines. The ground opened. Ahead lay a rough clearing, frozen clumps of grass, stiff and gray. Wind lessened. The wheel tracks crossed slant over the hard earth, ended at a slope's edge. Beyond it, a low hut squatted, its roof patched with hides and old sacks, smoke leaking in thin threads from torn seams. Harlan stopped at the slope, let out a thin breath. He bent lower than the sightline of the hut. I pressed against a rotten stump, looking the same way. The cry rose again, unhidden now, closer. Harlan tightened his glove, adjusted the saddle strap. All action, no word. His hand pressed the horse's neck, eased it down, slowed its breath. The horse understood. Head dropped, nostrils steaming short bursts. He slid the leather strap from his shoulder, eased past me, crawling down the low side of the slope where the snow was shadowed. I followed, guarding each breath as if sound alone might break them. Nearer. The smoke grew heavier. Damp wood, smoldering. The stench of old fat, black crust, clinging to a pan's rim. At the hut's eave, a post stood upright. Fresh scratches scored deep. Grooves where rope had bitten. Snow at the entry broken through. Mud beneath, frozen hard. Dark in spots as if soaked with ash. Harlan lifted a hand. Wait. Inside, something toppled. No voice. Only wind passed. Not wind. Something breathing under it. Weak. I looked at Harlan. He saw. His eyes touched that blanket's edge, then moved away. His back tightened, a half-inch drawn in. His scarred left hand reached across to his right, checked the weight of his holstered gun, just to know it was there. He didn't draw. He seldom drew before he had seen the man. Door, he said low, the sound like a breath. I crawled close to the eave, touched my fingers to the wooden bar. The wood stuck cold to skin. I lifted the bar, slow, avoiding a thud. Harlan did not look at me. His eyes stayed on the dark at the threshold, where more than once in this life men had hidden guns. I pushed the door aslit. Damp smoke blew in my face. My eyes burned. I stifled a cough. The child under the horse blanket let out a faint cry, as if reacting to the rush of new air. Inside, still no human voice. "Anyone there?" I asked into the dark, voice just over the threshold. No answer. Only the sound of coals breaking in the stove. Harlan signaled. Still no entry. He knelt, picked up a small stone, tossed it through the door toward the dark corner. The stone struck the dirt with a dry tick. No running, no startle, only another breath, weaker. He raised his head, looked toward the hut's left eave, where another post was driven slant into the ground. On it, a brown streak dragged with the grain. Not deep, as if someone had leaned there long, warmth soaking out, leaving grime to dry. At the foot of the post, a black patch, rough with soot, the ground around stamped flat, the edges of snow broken into shards. "They dragged here," I said. Harlan gave no reply. He set one knee down, slid his hand under the horse blanket, touched inside very light, like touching the belly of a sick horse. A faint hiss of breath, then a dry swallow. He drew back his hand, thumb damp. He looked. Not blood. Milk. Cold milk. He wiped it on the hem of his coat, left a pale streak. "Inside," he said. I understood. He meant confirm if anyone lived beyond what lay under the blanket. He stripped the glove from his right hand, tucked it at his belt, bare hand on the door frame. His knuckles stood sharp, nails cut short, edged black. He pushed the door a little more. Smoke blew again. My eyes stung, but had adjusted to the dim inside. Saw the low stove, coals sunk, a black pot on top. Saw a patched one-legged table, a chair with a broken back, and on the ground, by the far post, one figure. A woman tied to the post, head fallen, feet off, not grown. Only the thin pulse at her neck beat under the dirt. Her breath came in faint smoke, broken, like handwriting of a trembling hand. I glanced to the horse blanket at the eave. It swelled, then sank, to another rhythm, two rhythms, one fast, one slow. I knew why the crying broke. Something had spent all its breath. Harlan stood 2 strides from her. He did not rush forward. His eyes went around slow. The tree line, the hut roof, the ground, the drag marks. He counted. No sound. I knew he was searching for a third print, a fourth. The number of men matched the number of tracks. He saw no more. The wind had eaten them. His left hand settled on his knife hilt. His right lifted, palm out, a sign older than both of us. I did not come to strike. The woman still did not raise her head. The rope at her wrists darkened, meltwater seeping the grooves. Drops slid to the edge of black ice, vanished. Still breathing, I said, to keep a human voice in the air. Harlan nodded. He stepped half a step, then stopped. His eyes fell to an object between us. A frayed rope, stained with blood, the same one I had seen first. Whether blown by wind or kicked from some boot, it lay there, between us, same as before. A question laid again, nearer now. He bent, but did not take it, only looked, long enough for the cold to crawl through his collar, bite into skin. I felt he was speaking to the rope, not with his mouth. With each time he refused to touch. Inside, the coals sank, the black pot rattled once. Smoke thickened, then thinned. The horse blanket stirred. A child's small broke out, as if afraid to be heard. I stepped half forward toward the woman. Harlan raised his hand, barred me, eyes elsewhere. He shook his head slight. Not yet. Then he shifted, circling to the side, let the gray sun strike over his shoulder onto her face. The weak light caught her eye, lifted one lid, not fully open, just enough to show a pupil. She looked at Harlan, not at me. In that look, no pleading, no hate, only weight. As if she was setting him on a scale inside her head. Heavy or light, enough or not enough. Harlan lowered his hand from the knife. His right rose to his chest, hooked into his coat, as if reaching for something flat and thin. I thought he would pull a cloth, but no. His fingers touched a square, hard shape in his pocket, a small notebook. He did not take it out, only touched, then drew his hand back. Quick, a habit, and that habit chilled me more than the blood smell. "You," I called, voice low. "Quiet," he said, but the word was ground. The frayed rope lay still. The wind not strong enough to roll it further. It became a line, a cross between us, like chalk drawn on dirt. Cross, not cross, everything held. "You see it?" I asked again, asked both her and Harlan, a question not needing reply. I only needed sound in the air. Harlan shifted weight, his right heel pressed deep into ice. His face did not change. His eyes darkened one notch, then lightened again. He raised them to the hut's roof, smoke still leaking from the hole, a sign the fire was not dead. A live fire meant someone still tended it. Maybe the hand that tied the rope had left, maybe not. He lifted his hand, touched lightly at the rope binding her wrist. Not the frayed rope on the ground, but the new hemp. He did not cut, only pressed at one spot to test slack or tight. She flinched, but made no sound. Harlan drew back his hand. "Fire's dying," I said, looking at the stove. Harlan did not look at the stove. He looked one last time at the frayed rope. Then he spoke, as if to the rope, as if to the wind. "Go." He did not turn back, did not touch my shoulder to pull me along, only stepped, silent, to the post where the woman was bound. I followed, ice breaking under my boots sharp as glass. Each crack sounded like a bent word. She opened her eyes just as we stood a hand's reach away. Her gaze fixed on Harlan's left hand, the scarred one. I saw that hand open, then close, then open again. No knife in it, only air. Harlan stood a moment, long enough for the wind to turn once more. He raised his hand to his face, not to shield, but to measure the span from rope to skin, then lowered it, did not cut, did not loosen, did not give hope too soon. I understood. This was the part where he measured a promise inside his head, a promise like the rope itself, if held or not touched, nothing between. The child's cry broke again under the horse blanket, weaker. The woman's breath broke shorter. On the roof the smoke thread thinned. Fire was near gone. I turned my head toward the tree line, saw nothing, only the tracks we had left in snow. 2 narrow lines leading into a story no one asked leave to write. Harlan inhaled, slow, not deep. His eyes left the rope, fell on her face. He said 2 words, not loud, but enough for me to hear, enough for her to hear. Still here. That was all. Not "don't fear," not "it'll be fine." Only rope and silence, we had both. Harlan drew his knife, the blade thin, flashed once, then went dim. He angled his body, shielded the wind. His left hand held her wrist, his right slid the blade at the knot. The hemp snapped with a faint sound, like a hair pulled free from skin. Her flesh raised purple beneath dirt. He said nothing, only cut the other binding, steady, not hurried, not slow. She opened her eyes, lips pale, nostrils trembled faint. "Don't take them," she said, breath leaving like smoke. Not plea, just command, thin as paper. The horse blanket at the eave stirred. I lifted a corner. 2 little girls, curled small as fists. Their faces red-blotched, baby hair stuck with frost, breath white and soft, catching at the blanket's edge where salt ice formed into tiny glass beads. One only sniffled, the other grimaced, a faint breaking. Harlan slid the knife back at his belt. His hand pressed the woman's back, lifting her. She was light as dry grass, one shoulder sagging under bruises. At his touch she recoiled, but did not pull away. I shed my outer coat, draped it on her shoulders. She did not look at me, her eyes fixed on the stove's coals inside, on the black pot still warm, rim crusted with milk. "I'll carry," I said. Harlan nodded. I lifted the quiet one first, cold, strange, like a stone with pulse. Her cheek brushed my glove, left damp trace. I held her near the stove, close enough for warmth, not close enough for smoke. Harlan lifted the other. He set the child against his chest, tucked her under his inner coat. The scarred hand brushed her neck. He flinched once, then stilled, let warmth seep through. The child's face smoothed, mouth opened, searching for what was not there. The woman leaned on the post, her wrists fallen, rope marks deep as ink. I saw her eyes slide to Harlan's hand, stop at the scar. Her face changed little, a fraction of weighing, a fraction of acknowledgement. "Name?" I asked, only to put sound in the air. She shook her head. "Not yet." One word, "Done." I poured water from the kettle into a wooden bowl, dropped in a bit of brown sugar left in my pouch. Harlan sat on the step, back against the post, his shoulders pulled in to block the wind for the three. He brought the wooden spoon to the child's mouth inside his coat, touched it so a drop slid in. It sucked weakly, then sucked again. "Don't take them," the woman repeated, half to him, half to the wind. "No one's taking," I said. But Harlan did not repeat. He looked straight into her eyes, long. Then he nodded, very small, like a signature on wet paper. The sky dropped another shade of gray. The fire in the stove sank low. I threw in scraps of wood. Listen. Tree line, a sound carried far. Not wolf, not deer. Hooves striking stone, shredded by wind. Harlan stopped his hand, his eyes tilted. He did not ask if I heard. He had heard. "Let's go," I said, hand steadying the bowl. Harlan gave no answer, only raised 2 fingers. "Wait." His eyes swept again. Drag marks, the broad prints, the frozen mud darkened. He held them to memory, then bent, tucked the coat closer around the child at his chest, cinched it, sealed the warmth in. The child in my arms wheezed. The woman lifted her head a little, enough for her eyes to meet his. "Don't let them see," she said. Harlan nodded. He lifted his hand, not to touch her shoulder, but to hold in the air between, as if building a wall. Then he turned, walked first, back toward where we had left the horses, laying his new steps inside the old. I followed, carrying the child, setting my boots in the ruts he made. The woman came last, stumbling, but not groaning. From the woods, hoofbeats sounded again, then cut. The wind turned once more. Our breath rose white against it. Night pressed in earlier than it should. May Dunn's place stood at the road's edge, low-roofed, sign sunburned. I went in first. Harlan stayed outside to reset the tack, then brought the 3 around the back. May glanced at me from behind the bar, her thin hands still wiping glass, as if that kept winter stalled. Harlan dragged 3 back. May said quiet, not lifting her head. Her eyes slid over me like wind over grass. "I see, not hearsay." I gave no answer. Set coins on the counter, black coffee, hot. May poured. The few customers hunched at their cups, but ears leaned our way. Someone chuckled, the sound gone quick as a knife's flick. In the corner, the mute boy, Eli, sat near the stove, hands holding dry bread. He looked at me, then to the back door. I nodded. He nodded back, eyes wide, unblinking. In that look was no question, only record. "Word reached anyone?" I asked, sipping. Bitter coffee, burnt smell. "Her husband's people," May whispered, lips barely moving. "The crows. The uncle, Ezekiel, hunting northwoods. He'll catch the scent." Her hand stopped wiping, thumb rubbed a smear slow, like rubbing a bad habit of life. A man by the door coughed, false, then said just loud enough, "Your rancher brings home trouble." Eyes on no one, but all heard. Another laugh, dry, stuck in smoke. I looked at Eli. He chewed slow, as if afraid the sound might spill something. His eyes dropped to my hand on the cup, then to the back door, then back to me. I knew. He wanted to know where Harlan would take the 3. So did I. "Don't let folks trail," May said, her eyes sharper than her years. "Take the side door." Did not look at me again. But I saw her shoulders ease, as if he had set down a bucket heavy with water. Eli rose, bread in hand, walked to the door, cast a last look at the curtain. No sign, just stood, a living marker. Harlan came in from the back, sweat on his temple though cold. He did not go to the bar. He only put his hand on my shoulder, a short touch of bone. Go, he said. I left coins under the sugar jar. May did not count. Eli opened the front, blocking, like he waited someone. We slipped past the kitchen, through the narrow run, walls smelling of burnt onion. No one looked after, or pretended so. Night pressed down. Back at the ranch, Harlan kindled fire again. Not much wood, just enough for warmth to breathe out. He set the two children close, wedged between old saddles to block wind. The woman lay on a cowhide, eyes half shut, wrists free now, but the marks still there, purple as fresh ink. Harlan took a bottle of thin milk from the shelf, set it near the stove to warm. He did not look at me. I did not ask. The wind hissed faint at the eaves, slid through a gap in the boards, whipped the flame so it bit the wood's edge. I sat by the door, gun across my thigh. Every sound was sharp. When the two children sucked and slept, Harlan drew a small notebook from his coat, old leather cover, paper edges worn to his hand. He sat on the low chair, back to the stove. The firelight caught his ear, made the scar white. He opened it. Not many pages. The paper showed rows of names, written in black ink, straight, each line ending with a strike, most already crossed, a few not. His finger stopped at a surname. I knew it. It was the one May had said at the saloon. Crow. Beneath it, a second name, the writing shakier, like written in the dark. Harlan looked at it long. He did not breathe hard, only looked. He did not turn the page, did not write more, did not strike. His finger slid off, traced the cover's edge as if checking a tear. Then he closed the book. A final move. No sound. You know them, I said. Not a question. Harlan slid the book under the table, locked it with a homemade latch, then laid a knife flat across. He looked toward the woman. She had opened her eyes, fixed on the stove. The flame danced in her pupils like small fish. Name? Harlan asked, his voice blunt as stone. She turned her head slow. Miriam, she said, voice near gone. She did not ask his name, did not ask where this place was. She only looked at the children, pulled the cowhide higher. Harlan jerked his chin toward the wooden bed in the corner. Lie there. He asked much. I did not. I listened to 3 breaths. One groan, 2 children, blended with the wind. I knew the night would be long. Morning rose in a silver sheen on the wood grain. Frost clung in beads on the reins hung at the wall. I woke early, Harlan earlier. He stood on the porch, bare hands, damp sleeve over shoulder, eyes on the grass whitened by frost. The horses were saddled, a clean blanket tied on, 2 cloth sacks hung at the flank. Inside, Miriam sat up, eyes still smoky with night, the children pressed to her chest. She looked out long. She did not ask where, did not ask why, only pulled her coat tighter around their necks. I brewed coffee, bitter smell threading the wood. Harlan stepped in, reached for the cup, drank once, set it down. He did not sit. He pulled the notebook from under the table, looked at it one breath, then hit it again. I saw his finger press the cover's edge a second, then let go, like someone letting a stone fall. They think you'll take them to town, I said, to open a road for answer. He shook his head slight, stepped to the bed, bent, did not touch Miriam first. He touched the blanket, tested its dry. He felt the child's forehead. Then he said to Miriam, low enough to hear, "They go with me." No explanation. She looked at him, did not nod, did not shake. Her lips worked as if to form another word, then stopped. She lifted the older child, gave it to him. He held it tight to chest, The child did not cry. It opened its eyes, looked at his chin where beard grew coarse, then reached for his coat. Harlan pulled it lower, tucked the hand in. I wrapped the other in a blanket, gave it to Miriam, then stepped to the door. The first air cut in, cold at the face. Harlan crossed the step, set his boot in the stirrup, swung light, steady, kept the bundle from sliding. Miriam followed, the child pressed to her breastbone, climbed in one motion, practiced as one who had climbed all her life. I tied the sacks to the saddle, checked the knot again. Leather rasped metal, dry. Outside, the sky still as old tin. The dirt road stretched brown and empty, no trace of men. "They'll be watching," I said, hands still on the knot. "Let them," Harlan answered. He touched heel. The horse moved. I walked beside a while, listened to iron bite gravel. Miriam did not turn. She looked straight ahead, neck drawn in, eyes fixed on the brown line. At the gate, Eli stood. Where from, I did not know. Bread crust in his hand like last night. He twice, then quit. "Short road or long?" I asked. Not important, but my mouth needed word. "The road without men," Harlan said. I understood. I stayed. Watched them vanish past the birches bare. The smell of saddle, of cold milk, of last night's smoke hung on their coats, dragged a thin line between life and death. On the doorframe behind me, the iron hooks swung, tapped once, faint, like coins striking in a poor man's pocket. They thought he would leave them, but he had said, "They go with me." In a voice not seeking witness, in a coat still stained with hut dirt, in a left hand scarred holding a child, a right hand steady on the saddle. No promise, only act. And in that cold morning, act was law. Word came before the dust settled. Hooves beating stone from afar, steady, unhurried. I was stoking the fire. Harlan stood on the porch, bare hands, his shoulder bandage faded. He propped the rifle against the frame, did not touch, like setting a shadow there. Miriam stood inside against the wall. Both children pressed to her chest, her hair clumped in thin streaks. No one spoke. 3 horses stopped in the yard. Ezekiel Crow sat in the middle, thick, broad-shouldered, beard bristled like wire. He did not dismount at once, looked across the fence as if at a stray cow. The 2 gun hands with him sat crooked in their saddles, hats low, coats tied tight. All 3 kept rifles across their thighs, mouths unsmiling. Ezekiel's horse snorted white, pawed once, patient. "Rancher," he called. No spare words. His voice rough, the taste of dry whiskey in it. Their blood must go back to theirs. Harlan did not move. His face gave nothing. His eyes fixed on Ezekiel's right shoulder, where the coat bulged with something hard. Then slid to his hand, stopped at the silver ring. I saw Harlan's knuckles show sharper in the cold. The rifle stayed by the frame. He neither dropped his hand nor reached for it. The gun hands scanned the yard as if counting trees, counting doors, counting men. One spat on the ice, the spit froze flat. The other tipped his hat a notch, wiped sweat from his brow with a sleeve. They waited for command like 2 dogs at their master's hand. Inside, a child coughed once. Then still. Miriam pressed her mouth to their hair, chest lifting, falling slow. Her eyes slid through the crack, past Harlan's shoulder, without pause. I heard the coat hook at the door tremble, maybe wind, maybe someone's heart against the wood. "My house," Harlan said, voice low. "The road runs past that field." He nodded toward the flowed. He shifted half a step, closing more of the doorway behind. His shoulders turned, enough that if a shot came, he could pull the door across himself. I knew. He was building a wall with his body. The gun hands shifted weight, their heels scraping the ice with a dry rasp. One glanced toward the small window where Miriam's sleeve had just shown. "I see her," he murmured. Ezekiel did not turn. He only spoke louder. "My women bore the burden. Return it." He jerked his chin. "The two. Crow blood doesn't nest in another house." Harlan breathed once. Short. His hands stayed. Only his eyes moved, point to point. Each word of Ezekiel's passed before him like straw on water. Could pick up, could let drift. He let it drift. "They're not stock," I said. Not sure for whom. Just to drop the words, see if they cracked or sank. Ezekiel turned on me. First time. His eyes traveled boot to face, stopped at the corner of my mouth. "Who are you?" he asked, stepping half back, enough that his gun was no longer covered by coat. I did not answer. Harlan tilted his head a fraction, telling me to keep. I kept. Wind dragged a cloud low. The yard dimmed. Harlan lifted his chin a little, as if scenting storm. No storm. Only men. Ezekiel stepped closer. He stood 2 strides from the porch. "I don't repeat," he said. "Their blood," he struck his chest with his hand, "must return to theirs." His other hand dipped into his coat, not to draw the gun. Something else showed at the edge of the pocket, thick, brown, frayed. I saw Harlan's back stiffen, like a horse hearing grass snake. While the words passed, a piece of frayed rope slid from Ezekiel's pocket, dropped to the ice, rolled once, slow. The wind pushed it half a turn more, then again. It crept across a brown strip of dirt, caught the cold, stopped at Harlan's boot. No one bent. The wind pushed again. It touched his toe, bounced like a live thing. Harlan did not step back, did not kick it off. He stood, let it find its place. I lowered my eyes. The hemp was old, grease-stained. One strand marked red and dry. A knot tied quick, single loop drawn tight, length enough for 2 wrists. Ezekiel did not look down, or he looked and chose not to. "You've nothing to pay with, Pike," he said, using surname, not name. "You've a shaft." From his side, fingers open, a man ready to block. "Fine rope?" I rasped, eyes still on the ground. Ezekiel glanced down for a blink, long enough to see it. When he looked up, a smile cut one corner. "Ours," he said, "to bind what needs binding." Wind carried a dry leaf, scraped it across the rope, raised dust, let it fall. Time held a beat. I heard Harlan's coat rasp the porch wood, the timber shift faint. Still, he did not bend. Ezekiel raised his chin, signaled one hand. "Fetch them," he said, his voice slow, as if asking for salt. Gentle and done. No one need fire. The gun hand lifted a boot onto the step. His spur clicked dull. His hand moved slow, but it was still a hand going into another man's house. I pulled my gun half from its holster. Harlan did not look at me. He was quicker by half a word. He turned, blocked the door, his shoulder sealing the gap. His boot toe landed beside the rope on the ice. He did not crush it, did not kick it away. In that stillness, I heard my heartbeat stumble off the rhythm of hooves. The rest of the world flattened. Only the cold ice, the smell of tallow, the heavy breath, and the thing lying between us like a question rolled here unanswered. "Don't," Miriam said, not louder than the wind, not to us, to the child in her arms. The gun hand stopped on the second step. He looked into Harlan's eyes, found nothing. He glanced to his master. Ezekiel jerked his chin again. The man stepped once more, the wood complaining under his weight. That was when Harlan bent. He bent slow, as if his back were stone. His scarred fingers touched the thing. It was cold, rough, the fray biting skin, and his hand trembled, slight, enough that the bone under knuckle whitened, then eased. He lifted it off the ice, left a strand slack in his palm. A simple motion, yet everything drew tight. Miriam stood behind the slats, eyes wide. She did not beg, did not nod, did not shake. Her gaze nailed to his hand, as if weighing pressure. Her lips pressed to a thin line. A strand of hair stuck to her lid. No one brushed it down. The two children lay silent, as if they knew silence the same way. Ezekiel smirked, thinking he'd won. "Sense," he said, taking half a step more. "Tie them back. Your own hand makes it." Harlan did not. Harlan's neck cord rise, then sink. His breath came shallow. The scar on his left hand glared pale through dirt. He shifted, his boot pressed to the step edge, solid as stone wedged. What lay in his palm turned from question to period. Sentence ended. Miriam exhaled. A faint thread, insect thin. She hugged the child tighter, turned her face aside, but her eyes stayed fixed on his hand. At her lid's edge, a tremor showed, not from tears, from holding. "Harlan," she said, first time his name, no louder than a whisper, not please, not mercy, only name. "Return or keep," the left-hand gun muttered, his head tipped a notch toward his master. He feared silence more than he feared fire. Ezekiel did not answer at once. He looked at what Harlan held, then at the bandage white on his shoulder, then at the dark frame of the doorway behind him. He measured. The wind stirred his beard like reed grass. Ice under his heel moaned. Harlan lifted his hand, not high, held it level for a breath, the twisted hemp bristling, its frayed ends stiff as quills. He crushed again, slow, his face unchanged. I heard one faint fiber snap in its gut. None but us heard, yet all knew what had changed. "Enough," Harlan said. 2 words, low, hard enough not to need volume, not command. A close, with grip, with distance held. Ezekiel frowned. The smile on his lips went out as if a hand smothered flame. He shoved his hand into his coat again, fingers caught cold air. What he wanted was not there. His eyes returned to Harlan's palm, a vein at his temple throbbed once. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice suddenly rougher, the last word dragged. Harlan did not answer. He dipped his head slightly, like a man listening to wind under the stable. Then his eyes lifted again, locked. What he held was no longer another man's tool, it was line, not to be crossed. The moment thickened. I heard wood in the wall strain, maybe to the weak sun, maybe to what was about to break. Dust flecks danced in a thin beam, then fell. The horses shifted their bits. A hoof struck earth once. Those small sounds laid floor for the great silence. Miriam's hand left the child's nape by an inch. It hung, touched nothing, then dropped on her knee. Her eyes half closed, her mouth opened. No word. In the no word, all words already spoken. I kept my gun in leather, my finger still. Shot, not run, not retreated. Only it changed meaning in a man's palm. And silence grew so heavy the wood step bent a fraction under my boot. The shot came like stone cracking skull. The door took the first round, split in thick shards. I fell against the wall, board dust rising with sour resin. Harlan did not turn. He shoved Miriam and the children back past the stove, struck the root cellar hatch in the floor, a wood lid with rusted iron handle. He yanked. It lifted, black mouth of damp soil and old potatoes. Down, he said, voice low, nothing wasted. I held the hatch, Miriam sliding first, clutching the child to her chest, her bruised wrist dark against her sleeve. The other child in Harlan's arm, his coat covering its head, his face near its hair a moment. Then he passed it to me. Another shot tore the step. Splinters burst. His shoulder bled, red blooming on the white wrap like a shameful flower. He did not groan, only drew back his arm, turned his shoulder, shielded my back from the line of fire. I pushed the child to Miriam, dropped a lid halfway, left a slit for breath. Smoke carried through the bullet holes, bitter as burnt coffee. Outside, boots struck the porch. A dark form crossed the frame, stretched across the floor. "Bring them out!" a voice roared, Ezekiel, ragged as a saw. "Now!" Harlan seized the short table, flipped it, set it as a shield between him and the door. Fresh splinters flew. He stepped back half a pace, his scarred hand slid onto the rifle at the shelf, drew it, quiet, like pulling a nail from plank. His eyes cut once to the hatch gap, a small nod, enough for me to lower the lid. I set it down, iron clinking faint on wood. The cellar's night swallowed the children's breath. I stayed above, between the gunfire and the dirt box, my hand gripping iron like gripping a word. Shots tore, wood answered. Harlan lunged, his shoulder soaking, arms stretched, fired once. A man outside split in two sounds, shout, fall. Boots slipped, struck the post, then silence. The other cursed short, fell back from the step. Ezekiel shouted, "Back, flank!" Hooves outside battered the ice, frantic. Another round cracked into the frame, a hand span from my ear. I smelled burnt hair. Harlan shifted the table, drew the line tighter. He spoke, not a word, his face flat as winter river. I heard his sleeves scrape the wet bandage, the faint hiss of blood through ice. He pressed me toward the hatch, not with hand, with body. I understood. I crouched, one leg still braced on the floor, eyes above enough to see the shadow moving at the small window. "Move!" Ezekiel urged. His hand showed at the door, then withdrew. He would not hence. Metal clattered on stone, his gun gone. The last man bolted out of sight, boots skidding on ice, muttering words broken. "You sons!" Ezekiel spat, the curse fading. He did not step closer. He stood behind his horse, using the saddle as shield. "I'll come back. Hear me, Pike?" He spat wet on the yard. Harlan did not answer. He loaded, his hand trembling as he set the round. Cold or wound, I could not say. He looked at me. His eyes asked, "The cellar." I raised my thumb. Miriam quiet. The children breathing short. The smell of damp earth like black bread. Ezekiel pulled rein, leather scraping iron, biting sound. "Remember my face, Pike!" He drew back his horse. It screamed, tossed its head, hooves slicing ice flat, shards white as salt. "Their blood belongs with theirs. I'll show you who keeps law here." A block of silence after that. Then whose, even, fading. Not gone, just beyond shot. I crawled from the hatch, drew air hard, sweat cold at my neck despite frost. Harlan leaned against the wall, rifle at his thigh, head low for a beat, blood soaked deeper on his shoulder, dark as paint. "I hate that voice," I said without teeth. "He'll be back." Harlan nodded. He did not look at me. He looked at the shattered wood, the blood on the floor, the prints scattered into the yard. He breezed out once, shallow. "Bar the back," he said. I went, dropped the bolt. On the wall hung his wide hat, its brim split ragged on one side. I set it on my head. It did not fit. I felt a fool. We dragged the wounded man onto the porch. Harlan's bullet had torn his shoulder through, missed the heart. He still breathed. Harlan looked down, his eyes blank. "Go," he said. The man did not wait for second telling. He stumbled, clutching his arm, crawled to the yard, mounted the fleeing man's horse, and the two rode past the fence, leaving crooked tracks. I set the bar, stepped back in. Miriam had lifted the hatch, her hair stuck to her forehead. She did not ask if they were gone. She looked into Harlan's eyes. He nodded. She climbed up, dragging the blanket. The two children slept heavy, mouths open like split fruit. Outside, the wind pushed through bullet holes, carried the powder smoke all the way into the stove. Harlan sat on the low chair, tore cloth to bind his shoulder himself. I passed him a bottle of whiskey. He did not drink. He poured some on the wound, teeth clamped on his lower lip, eyes half shut. The liquor soaked the bandage, dripped to the floor like ink. "We're not done with him," I said. Harlan gave no reply. He looked at his own hand, the scarred one, the hand that had once gripped rope, now wet with new blood. I knew he was weighing something else, not bullet paths. He stood, went to the table. The lower drawer latched. He opened it. The small notebook showed, leather dark, corners worn. He pulled it out, set it on the wood, sat as a man sits before a whetstone. Sideways. He opened it. The page of names lay mid-book. Most lines struck through, a few not. Crow there, black, straight. The sea like a beak. Under it, Ezekiel, jagged as if written with a cold hand. Harlan set the pencil tip down, breathed faint, drew a line. Not slashed, not pressed. A thin stroke, crossing the name. Through the surname, through the given name. At the end he lifted the lead. No second mark. Done. I waited for words, at least one. He gave none. He folded the book, laid it flat, his hand resting on the cover as if holding a sleeping animal. His eyes fixed forward, hooked on nothing. His left hand curled, loose fist, scar pale. "Why?" I asked, voice rough with smoke. "He's still breathing." Harlan raised his head slow, as if rising from water. He did not look at me. He looked at the fire. "Enough," he said. One word, the same he used with the rope at the porch. I understood. Enough. Some things he erased so they would not call for more payment. A kind of settling that never reached blood. Cold enough others could not hear it. Miriam stood by the post, child in arms. She watched from start to finish, her face unchanged, but her shoulders sank a fraction, as if a stone slipped from her hem. In her eyes, I saw a silence without name. Not gratitude, not ease, only recognition. Harlan closed the book, slid it back into the drawer, latched it, laid the knife across as before. His hand pressed the blade once, then lifted. He turned, lifted the pot from the stove, poured water into a bowl, dropped salt in, his motions neat enough to cover the whiskey stench from the bandage. No hoof sound outside, only wind stringing through bullet holes. Harlan and I each sat a chair. the table between like neutral ground. All was over, and not over. The hole in the door stayed, an open eye unblinking. Night dropped low as a smith's roof. We cleared debris. Shards of board into a bin, blood wiped with wet rag. The rope, the one stained with old blood, the one passed through Harlan's hand that afternoon, lay on the table, darker where new blood soaked the hemp. No word passed, yet no one set it on the floor. We left it in the center, uncovered. Miriam sat with the children at the bed's edge, her back to the wall. Her eyes stayed open, fixed long on the blood rope. No thank you, no word. Her spine straight, her hand now free of rope, cupped the child's neck by instinct. The other stirred in the blanket, its breath heavier than by daylight. Their skin, it stayed there between breath and the smell of gruel. Miriam rose, walked slow to the table. She did not touch. She stood across, an arm's reach, looked one moment longer. Then she returned, drew the blanket up for her child, her eyes still carrying the lamp's sheen. In them was something folk call healing, but it was not warm. It was quiet, like a scar just ceased aching. "Tomorrow," I said, glancing toward the door. Harlan understood. He nodded. We slept with rifles near hand. The wind eased. Fire in the stove thin. No crack. The house closed small around the table and the blood rope. I heard dust fall in the dark like a rain of grit. Morning came, flat and pale. I opened the door. The wind carried iron from the night. In the yard some folk stood by the fence, not stepping in. May Dunn leaned on a post, lips tight, hair tied clean. Eli crouched on a stone, old bread in hand, eyes fixed without blink. They did not call. Others did, a murmur behind May. Give them to the law. Let them settle. They wanted to see the handover, as if it were stray calf returned. Harlan came to the porch, his bandage clean, a new coat. He did not look at the fence. He looked at the saddle. He took the frayed rope from the table, the dried blood hardened black. He did not wash it, did not throw it. He tied it to the rear ring of the saddle. A simple knot one tug would loose, and let it hang to the ground, fray brushing the ice. "You plan to—" I asked, the sentence left open. "Enough words," he said. He put his boot to the stirrup, swung up. No one behind him. Miriam stayed in the house, child in arms, standing behind the curtain, eyes still. I stood at the steps, hand in my pocket, touched the cold of the gun grip, then drew it out. No need. Harlan urged the horse forward. The rope dragged after, empty, carving a crooked line on the ice. It bound no wrist. It snared no foot. It moved like the shadow of yesterday, pulled through this morning's light, to show the only thing worth tying today was the intent to tie. May said nothing. She only turned her head, a glance across Eli. The boy swallowed dry, eyes wet under the sun. He watched the rope draw its mark on the ice, saw the slack knot, then watched Harlan's shoulders. He nodded, barely. A seal without ink. A man in the rear crowd snorted. "A show," he said. None answered. Harlan's hoofbeats joined the scrape of rope dragging on frost. We did not follow. We let him ride once around the meadow before the eyes of those who came for blood and who saw instead meaning dragged bare. Harlan stopped at the porch. He dismounted, unfastened the rope, looked at no one but the post by the house. I followed. Miriam stood at the threshold, not stepping back, not forward. She spoke no thanks, none needed. Her eyes slid past his shoulder, rested on the shirt hem, where the bandage lay clean. I heard Eli run barefoot over the ice outside, steps light as a cat. The frozen grass cracked under adult boots, but no one trod the drawn rope line. The pot on the stove boiled again. White foam rose, fell. We sat. None recalled the night. None forecast the afternoon. Consequence lay plain, not lesson, just marks on wood, a dry red smear at the table's edge, and a rope that changed meaning when dragged through morning. The wind no longer bore powder. It carried warm milk, wet hide drying in sun. Enough. That was the price. That was the silence. Morning pressed down like stretched cloth, damp. Frost clung to the horse's back in a thin layer, squeaked when touched. I went out and first saw the new post set on the barn roof. Straight, driven deep. Fresh wood still bled sap, hammer cuts sharp. On it the frayed rope from the other day hung still, tassel ends stiff from cold. Harlan had climbed up earlier. He stood angled, one hand steadying the post, the other touching rope like a man finding the right place for an old tool. The knot he made was not a noose, just a simple hitch. One pull and it slipped. He tested once. Let go. The rope dropped just enough, not brushing roof, not sweeping door. It hung in the gap between sky and timber like a sentence left unfinished. I stood below, arms folded, waiting. Hem brushed my side, itched. Harlan looked down. He did not smile, did not nod. He lowered himself, slid the beam, landed on both heels, sound dry. He looked at rope, then at the yard, where bloodstains were half masked by last night's snow, dark shadows left. He spoke low, as if to himself. High enough. For what? I asked. Out of my mouth, it sounded light as breath. Harlan gave no answer. He lifted the pail at the porch, flung water across the roof to rinse dirt from his hands. Drops broke, struck rope. Beads clung to the fray, 100 white sparks, then melted. He hung the pail back on its old hook. The hook rusted, edge sharp. I looked up again. Rope still there. No smell of tallow, no gunpowder. Only faint sun and new sap. Not a trophy. No head ever hung from it. Not a warning. It needed no blood to speak. Just a thing hung still. Eli came. I hadn't seen when. He sat on a flat stone by the fence, arms around knees. Fears their own doing, he answered, voice flat as a cutting board. He walked round the barn, tested nails, lifted the door latch, listened to the old woods groan. Each groan like a house beast, knowing its way back. In the sky a thin plume rose straight from the stovepipe, no wind to bend it. Just as the rope sagged, each holding its own place in the air, I leaned shoulder to post, looked past the yard to the road. The wheel tracks from last night gone. The dragged marks blurred like old men forgetting names. Only the new post on the barn stood fresh, and the rope hung fresh. All else was old, old past story. All right? I asked, eyes still on the roof. Harlan said. That only. A sparrow dropped to the fence, pecked 2 kernels from yesterday. It looked up, saw the rope, craned once, then dismissed it. Far off, children's laughter broke, thin. Here the rope swayed none, as if sky had taken it in among things unmoved. I stepped close, saw on the rope a deep black scar at one frayed knot. It had once crushed in Harlan's hand, cracked like breaking ice. From then it had aged a notch. Now, hanging, it seemed less wild. A witness placed right, asking no meaning, forcing none. We left the yard, went inside. The wooden door gave a soft creak, brief, like a comma between 2 silences. Inside the house, the fire kept a low flame. Miriam swept the yard outside, the wooden broom neat in her hand. 2 children clung to her hem, one tugging, one pulling. The hem shook into uneven rhythms, dark and light patches, like a water map. On her arm, the old rope mark bruised into the color of ripe plum, edged sharp. She swept from the porch steps out to the fence, dragging bits of wood dust and 2 or 3 broken brick pieces from last night's door. Dust rose low, not into the eyes. I sat by the table, cleaning bullet holes with an oil-soaked rag, then wedging a wood piece to seal them. Small work, meticulous. Harlan sat on the step sewing a sack. His shoulder still bandaged, the fresh strip pure white. The needle passed through the cloth with a steady puck, the hemp thread scraping a faint note against the needle's eye. He did not watch the point. His eyes stayed below, where sunlight drew a small square on the floor. Miriam reached that shadow's edge, then stopped. She lifted her head. The rope hanging from the roof lay in her line of sight, one strand dropping straight down. She looked at it long, then swept on. No talk, no nod, no, and then, glancing at the rope, he counted with his eyes to see if it swayed. No. He switched his count, counted Harlan's needle passes, also even. He smiled a little, almost nothing. "Got plans for the horses this evening?" I asked, only to break a silence too thick. Harlan did not look up. "Lead them to the creek," he said. "Back before dark." "Careful," I said. The word used too often, worn, but still said. Harlan nodded. He pushed the needle through one more seam, bit the thread, pulled. The snap, dry. Miriam lifted the bigger child onto her hip, the other hand still sweeping. She set the cornmeal sack at the door corner, her finger touching the edge, a dot of sweat sticking to the cloth. "From May," she said, not needing to look. I grunted, carried it in. Harlan put away the needle, slid the sack onto the table. He fetched water, washed his hands. The bandage soaked a darker spot. He did not look. He let water run over his scarred palm, the stream splitting into 2 lines at the raised flesh, slipping into the grooves. I set the sack on the shelf. Outside, the broom's rhythm slowed. Heavier strokes. Miriam paused a moment. The children pressed into her skirt, their backs warm. The faint, sticky scent of fresh milk lingered, familiar. One rubbed its nose into the cloth's hem, inhaling its mother's shadow. Harlan came out with 2 washed claws, passed them across the air, not touching hands. Miriam took them, wiped the children's sweat. No one said more. Healing here had no forecast. It was like the needle in, the needle out. Work done was done. The sun climbed a bit, then stood still. Passers-by glanced into the yard, then pulled back as if afraid to brush the rope on the roof. No one called a name. No one told last night's tale. The story sat in the wood patches, in the sewn sack, in the cornmeal sack still on the hand, in the steady breath of 2 children breaking now and then with a cough. "Someone asked at the saloon," I said, like wind speaking to a door. "What the law says." "The law," Harlan echoed, flat, like setting a stone on the floor. He hung the sack on a hook, tested the weight. Exact. He stepped inside, took his hat, paused at the threshold. He looked at Miriam. She nodded, very small, like a road sign. Harlan put on his hat, went to the stable. On the roof, the rope still hung. Its shadow fell into the yard darker than the rest. Light wind touched the yard, then left. Did not pull. Did not test. The sky held the roof with unseen weight. One asked, Who lit it? No one said, "Put it out." Its ash made a faint streak north, then faded. Boot prints leading there vanished under a soft crust of ice. The ground smoothed like someone laid a blanket over a matter not to mention. What once gave voice to cries now was only scent, passing, then gone. Miriam sat on the porch step, both children's heads on her lap. Harlan leaned saddles by the wall, hands on the horses' necks, stroking down their manes to lie flat. He did not look to the roof. I did. That rope. This was the third time I studied it in one day. Evidence untouched, still as law unwritten. It stood between us and the life before, neither forcing memory nor allowing forget. "If you burn the shack, burn it in your head," Mae Dunn once said at the saloon before anything happened. Today, she did not repeat it. She did not stop by. Folks left this place alone. Eli sat by the ditch, tossing stones into the small thaw stream. He flicked them light. Stones touched water, sank soundless. He looked to the stable roof, raised 2 fingers as if to measure, the rope still long as before. He grinned to himself, not to show. Harlan came back from the stable to the porch, took off his hat, hung it on a rusted hook. He passed the table where last night the rope had lain. On the wood, dried blood left gray veins I had not scrubbed away. They had become another grain of the table, not strange. Harlan set his hand on it half a beat, then pulled back. No recall, no erasing. He pushed the door, went in, fetched more thread and needle. Work followed work. At noon, "What's for food?" I asked, hand shaking the small pot. "Cracked rice," Miriam answered short. She looked at her shoe tip, then at the line of sun. She did not look at the rope anymore. She knew it was there. Knew like knowing the sound of her own steps in a blackout night. We ate. No talk. Spoons touched bowls with a thin sound like wind. The 2 children pressed fingers to the rim, caught a drop of porridge, brought it to their mouths, eyes round. Harlan broke dry bread, dipped it in the bowl, let it soften, then ate. He passed nothing. None asked. Each kept their part as they kept the standing silence. I went to the porch. The rope's shadow on the yard stretched a little longer. No hand pressed it down. It fell on its own with the sun. The stove smoke still went straight. A few crows flew far, eye level, their shadows crossing the barn roof little underhand. Miriam gathered the laundry, her hand pulling the old drying line, that line white, clean, tied between nails. The other rope hung on the roof, apart. 2 lines not looking at each other, yet the house held both. One for drying clothes, one for drying stories. "Tomorrow we fix the door," I said, looking at the frame with bullet holes. Harlan answered, He did not ask what I needed. He knew I'd fetch, chisel, wedge. He knew Miriam would sweep the splinters left. He knew Eli would sit somewhere by the fence and not speak. He knew Mae would send a sack of salt without knocking. These knowings were enough for a day to pass without promise. The sun at last shifted. The rope's shadow broke into 2, one into the barn's shade, one into the stoves. Sparrows perched the fence again, pecked 2 more kernels. Horses sighed, let out a thin breath. In that breath, I heard a peace unforced. When I stepped in, I turned once more. The rope hung still. On it, no words. Under it, no boots. Around it, wood, sun, smoke. Enough to say that from now the matter belonged there, in that place. Not missing, not excess, not explained, not proved. The stove smoke stayed straight. No more wind, or wind saw the rope on the barn, then turned away. I shut the door. The latch scraped wood half a note, just enough for the day to close itself. Like one buttons a shirt over a scar no longer aching. Outside, rope hung, law stood, and the old tale had burned to ash. Inside, breath was even. That was it. No hand added in, no hand pulled out. Just let it stand. On this land of pressed wind, men do not argue with mouth. Hanging a rope high is enough. Not threat, not show, just reminder. Harlan stitched a sack under the porch, shoulder still bandaged. Miriam swept the yard. 2 children clung to her hem. Eli passed by, silent. May left a sack of meal at the gate, then went. Work linked work. Silence fit back together, like boards of a pen tight against rain. The rope hanging on the roof. The thing that had tightened, had dropped, had shifted meaning, now stood still like a law without script. Whoever looked saw a part of themselves, to tie further or to let go. If you wish, you may leave a line about that rope. It is warning, or memory, or the way people here learn to loose their hand and still